Insurance Company of America presents When a Girl Marries, dedicated to all those who are in love and to those who can remember. This is the story of two young people who were destined to know the joy and the heartache that love can bring. A story for all those who, like Joan and Harry, have come to know what it means to hope and plan for the future, and to dream of that wonderful day to come when a girl marries. Friends, one of the things that we do regularly on this program is to introduce prudential representatives from various parts of the country. When a Girl Marries, the story of Joan Field. Today is very much a red-letter day for Harry Davis, the man Joan hopes to marry. This afternoon, he's going to surprise his mother with the new apartment he's picked out for her. And most important of all, he and Joan have decided to get married sooner than they originally planned. So feeling as he does today, it doesn't seem as if anything could stand in Harry's way, not even the wealthy Mr. Stanley's scheme to run him out of business. But for Betty McDonald, Harry's secretary, the day has been rather dismal. This morning, she took some flowers over to the new apartment for Harry's mother, only to find that Joan had already been there. Only Joan brought expensive red roses, which made Betty's own garden flowers look pretty shabby. So Betty has returned to the office feeling discouraged and heartbroken, which is still the case when Harry walked in.
Hello, Betty. I'm sorry I'm late. I took my time this morning hashing it over with my landlady, Mrs. McCaffrey, and taking her into the deep plot for this afternoon. Now, when Mother and Tom come here to call for me at 5 o'clock, Mrs. McCaffrey's going to pack up all their things and bring them over to 284 Main Street and leave them over there.
Oh, that's nice, Harry. Mr. Fowler was in.
Andy Fowler?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what do you have to say?
He had plenty to say. Mr. Stanley offered to advance the interest on his mortgage, and then he brought up the subject of a lawyer that he wanted Andy to go to instead of you.
Do you mean that?
Yes, I mean it. Mr. Stanley meant it, too.
Gosh, I wish we had some proof.
We have.
You have?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what do you mean?
Andy got Mr. Stanley to write him a letter telling him what he was going to do for him about the mortgage. And he also got a slip of paper from him on which he'd written down the name and the telephone number of the lawyer he wanted Andy to use.
He did? Why, that's terrific. Where are they?
Well, I couldn't get Andy to give them up.
Oh, why not?
He's so darn proud of them. He's carrying them around in his wallet and takes them out and looks at them about every 10 minutes.
Oh, that's not so hard. Why, he might lose them. They ought to be in the safe.
I know it. I suggested he leave them here, but he wouldn't do it.
Oh, gee, I'm worried about us carrying them around loose like that. Suppose something happened to them. They got lost in the shuffle. Where'd we be then?
I don't think there's any argument that would make Andy hand them over.
Where's he gone?
Back to his farm, I guess.
Where did he say he'd been the last few days?
He said he'd been lying low. He was waiting for the letter Stanley promised to write him. He didn't want to come in here to see us until he got it. But the minute it came through, he walked in here big as life.
Oh, that's swell. Maybe I ought to take a run over to Cedarville and tell Professor Kilpatrick about it.
Well, wait a minute. I'd better call the hospital first. He may have left there by now.
Yeah, all right. Call him up.
Give me Cedarville 211.
Oh, and Betty, look, would you mind doing something for me? I may be tied up this afternoon. I told my mother and Tom to be here at the office at 5 o'clock. Now,
Hello? Is this the Cedarville Hospital? Well, can you tell me if Professor Kilpatrick is still there? He's checked out.
Oh, where's he gone?
Can you tell me where he's gone? Oh, thank you. I've got it. Goodbye.
Well, where'd he go?
To the Stanley Arms Hotel right here in Stanwood. You can get over there in a few minutes.
Oh. Well, as I started to say, Mother and Tom will be here around 5. I've got some things to attend to this afternoon, and if I'm not back, do you mind keeping them occupied for a little while?
Well, for how long?
Oh, I don't know. Not more than half an hour. But if something happens to keep me longer than that, I wonder if you go over to the new apartment with him and you can have the fun of showing it to him.
Well, I'm terribly sorry, Harry, but I can't.
You can't?
No.
Oh, Betty, I expected you to. Well, you're supposed to go with me when they see it for the first time. You picked it out, didn't you? You're responsible for it.
Well, I'm awfully sorry, but I've got an engagement.
You've got an engagement? What engagement? Oh, I suppose I haven't got any right to ask you that. I'm sorry. You see, that's what happens when you get in the habit of counting on somebody to do things for you. You just don't remember that they've got any private life of their own.
I can wait here till 5:30.
Oh, say, if you'll do that, I'll be ever so much obliged to you. You see, I thought I might find out from you how to get out to Andy Farley's place. I'd like to get that letter and that scrap of paper on the lock and key. Where does he live, by the way?
It sounds up near that creek. It's a big place.
Oh, it'd take too long to get out there this afternoon, I guess. Maybe you could run me out tomorrow, do you mind?
No, I don't mind.
Unless you've got another engagement.
No, I haven't any engagement tomorrow.
You sure about that? Because if there's a young man in the offing, you may as well tell me now.
I'd tell you if there were one.
I'm disappointed that you're not going to the flat with us. I wanted to be able to give you the credit of finding it. Mother's going to be crazy about it.
I'm glad you like it.
Say, what's the matter with you, Betty? You don't sound a bit like yourself today.
I don't?
No, you sound as if you didn't give a darn about anything.
I don't mean to sound that way.
Is anything the matter?
Oh, no. Not a thing in the world.
Oh, that's good, because this is a very special day for me. I don't suppose I ought to say anything about it yet, but I've got to tell somebody. Listen, Betty, Joan and I are going to be married. Just as soon as Mother and Tom are all settled in the new place. Oh, I oughtn't to do it. I ought to wait. I ought to have more sense than to rush her into it. I'm not in any position to marry anybody, and I know it. But she wants to as much as I do. Isn't that wonderful? She's willing to take a chance at living on next to nothing with a guy like me.
I'm sure you'll be very happy.
Happy? I'll say we'll be happy. We may not have much in the way of worldly goods, but we're young and we're in love. And we'll say, what am I telling you all this for?
I'm sure I don't know.
No, neither do I. Except that you're so easy to tell things to that I've got the habit.
A few minutes later, finds Harry at the Stanley Arms Hotel, where Professor Kilpatrick has taken rooms. As he walks in on the professor, he says,
Well, Professor, it's good to see you someplace besides in a hospital.
Yes, I'm a well man now, ready for a good scrap. And nothing would give me more pleasure than to go after Ralph Stanley in a big way.
You can. We've got him.
What do you mean?
Andrew Farley's got a letter from Mr. Stanley.
What's in it?
An offer from Stanley to help Farley out in the matter of paying the interest on his mortgage.
Fine.
And that's not all. Farley was smart enough to get Stanley to write down the name of the lawyer he recommended in place of me, claiming that he'd forget it.
Oh, good. Then we can swing into action.
Farley's willing to testify to the whole conversation. And I think if he does, we can get others to do the same thing.
That's all I've been waiting for. Oh, what a break to have the actual evidence for cause of action against him.
Well, it's not in our hands yet.
Where is it?
Farley's carrying it around with him.
He mustn't do that. It's too valuable.
Well, that's what I think.
Well, didn't you tell him so?
I didn't get a chance. I didn't even talk to him.
Oh.
This has all been handled so far by Betty McDonald. She got to the office early this morning, and Farley came in and told her all that had happened. He was gone before I got there.
Well, didn't she tell him to leave the letter and the scrap of paper behind?
Of course. But he wouldn't do it.
Oh.
He seemed to think it was safer carrying it around on his person. But I'll get it from him. I'm going to try to get out to his place tomorrow morning, and I'll tell him it's the only evidence we've got, and it ought to be under lock and key.
Now, be sure you do.
I will.
Hey, this is going to be fun. To nail Stanley in his own bailiwick. To show him up in the town where he's the big squeeze.
You know, Professor, I still can't believe it.
How can you believe anything else?
I don't know, but It doesn't seem possible that a man would go to such extremes to get another man he's never even met.
That's the sort of thing Ralph Stanley would enjoy doing. If his reputation's what I've heard it is. He never forgets an injury. And he considers that you've injured him irreparably by busting up his plans for his only son.
Do you suppose it would do any good if I went and talked to him?
No, stay as far away from him as you can. Don't go anywhere near him. You'll spill the beans if you do.
Oh, how do you mean?
Why, don't you see? He hasn't the slightest suspicion that we know what he's up to. If you go and talk to him, you tip our hands. Might even be dangerous for Farley.
Oh, why would he tie up my visit with Andrew Farley?
Well, he might. Might go over everybody he talked to and find out where the leak was. He can remember that Andrew Farley was the only man to whom he gave anything in writing which might be used against him.
Oh, you think he would?
Well, of course he would if he thought anybody was going to attack his reputation in Stanwood. You forget, Harry. He's been the big mogul around these parts so long. He's ruled the place with an iron hand. And he's come to think of himself as omnipotent.
Well, suppose I just went in and talked to him as man to man and tried to overcome his feelings against me.
Yeah, you flatter yourself, young fellow. If you think you can put yourself across with Ralph Stanley. You're not a person to him by this time. You're an obsession.
Oh, get out. He's human. If I went to him and talked to him and told him that I was just a young fellow trying to get along and asked him for suggestions, well, I bet you any amount of money he'd forget how he felt about it.
Yeah, well, you're a fool if you do. You'll do it against the advice of counsel, and I'm your counsel. I haven't the slightest doubt that Ralph Stanley would put on an act for you which would be completely disarming. I tell you, Harry, he's out to get you. He'll run you out of town if he can.
Before we leave you now, I'd like to give you some interesting information about the Prudential Insurance Company. Be sure to hear When a Girl Marries, brought to you tomorrow and every day, Monday through Friday, by the Prudential Insurance Company of America, Newark, New Jersey. Daylight saving time ends Sunday, September 24th. If your community has been on standard time right along, this program will reach you 1 hour later, starting next Monday. Otherwise, tune in next week as usual. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.